Thank you guys, appreciate the opportunity. Interesting, amazing. So I'd like to share my personal story as it relates to Bitcoin in Florida. That's kind of, everything starts 2008. I don't want to rehash. Most of you guys have heard of Bitcoin. Obviously, this is the beautiful Bitcoin white paper in one page. You can actually buy this and print it out or hang it up on the walls. It's something for those of you who are really into Bitcoin, it's a beautiful little thing. We have 2 of those at our office, giant versions of those. And in 2009, the Bitcoin blockchain actually launches. Price of Bitcoin is 0. So up to this point, it hasn't really much to do with Florida, except that we are at the center of the we're at the center of the subprime mortgage crisis, which, if you recall, turned our, at the time, Republican chieftains into a frenzy of socialism, buying and bailing out banks left and right. And as a newcomer to Florida and the United States, I was just rubbing my eyes constantly. I'm like, this is really, really strange. I thought this was a capitalist country. For some reason, they don't seem to understand how capitalism is supposed to work. But there must be a reason, okay? It can't be that they're not understanding it. There must be something. I'm just going to watch and learn. So you launch this thing. Nobody understands. Nobody knows what to do with it except a few aficionados. And then this is 2010. We have Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. And we have the first big newsworthy item here in Florida. That's, of course, the pizza day. Right? So Bitcoin folks around the world, they all celebrate May 22nd every year as the pizza day. And the story behind the pizza day is in Jacksonville, Florida. This gentleman, Laszlo Hajsek, or so I think is his last name, he was thinking, like, everybody was thinking about the price, right? Like, is this something that will actually ever get used, or is it just some virtual token that's just sitting on a computer people were mining with their laptops, not even any sophisticated hardware? And he asked if anybody was willing to buy him pizza, or 2 pizzas, 2 large pizzas, you can see them there, for 10,000 Bitcoin. And the most expensive pizza. I think it's like, what was it now? Several $100 million. Yeah. And this is me, 2011, a lot younger, with 3 of my kids. This one was still somewhere else, and we homeschooled. We weren't really very happy with the public school system at the time. And in 2011, I was frequenting Hacker News. That's kind of a place where I hang out. And a lot of people here may know Hacker News. It's a forum, a news forum that was created, I think, in the early 2000s by Y Combinator. And that's kind of a meeting of the minds place for software engineers in general. And it's a good spot to be. And in 2011, I sent this to my boss. This is actually Amber here. He was using his wife's email address, but I was like, check this out. So I sent him a message, and Bitcoin was around $1 or so, I believe. And I explained the system to him after reading the white paper. And he looks at me and says, Lennart, that's what we call a Ponzi scheme in America. and I said, like, no, I know what a Ponzi scheme is, but this is a little bit different. You kind of have to look at it, because I was coming at it from computer science. This is my background perspective. And the Bitcoin white paper, or the Bitcoin as a working network, solved a super long-standing problem in computer science and networking. That was called the Byzantine generals problem, dilemma. And that we have a very interesting setup where the miners get incentivized to bundle up new transactions and then race against each other to get them confirmed on the Bitcoin blockchain. And we had lots of talks in the past, so I kind of, looking at the audience, I don't want to repeat all of this in technical detail, because today we're talking more about the history. But I think for everyone coming into Bitcoin, looking at how it actually works, that itself is a beautiful rabbit hole, and that's the innovation, that's the breakthrough. That Byzantine general's dilemma of how to be able to have a unique digital item that cannot be copied. That is the key part. 2012, This is my older daughter, and that's her 2 Bitcoin bicycle right there. So yeah, Brian Armstrong sent Bitcoin around to everyone when you signed up on Coinbase. 0.1 Bitcoin. Personally, it was very nice of him. He just had Coinbase set up, and Overstock. Patrick, what's the name? Patrick Byrne. He's a big libertarian, right? He was the CEO of Overstock at the time, and he fell in love with Bitcoin right away. So he worked magic at Overstock and added a pay with Bitcoin function very, very early. I think that was must have been 2012, because I bought that bicycle with 2 Bitcoin at Overstock. So not 10,000, you know. You're seeing it's getting more expensive. Okay, we don't have that bike anymore, by the way. But so yeah, 2013 was interesting. So price obviously starts appreciating. Throughout 2012, we were mining. We didn't really know what to do with it. The thought was the government is very, very far away at that point. Very far away. Everybody is laughing at you. Okay, you start talking about Bitcoin anywhere, and they're just, you know, you crazy. This is not going anywhere. If it ever were to go anywhere, the government is going to shut it down. Okay, so it's still in the realm of funny money, and the general population, you know, will not listen. After Litecoin demonstrated that you can just make copies of the Bitcoin code, there's no reason why you just have to be with Bitcoin. Why don't you launch a number of these coins with maybe different properties and maybe different innovative features, and then you let the marketplace see which one is going to win. There was a discussion that started, okay, is any of these new coins going to dethrone Bitcoin? Is that even possible? What about the network effect? What about the front runner effect of Bitcoin, right? So heated discussions online. And a lot of altcoins started popping up in 2013. So this is the Bitcoin meetup that we started in Sarasota. It's actually really amazing how early that was, you know, in hindsight, looking back. And yeah, we usually had 4 people. I was like, we didn't have enough space, you know, like small little office, but that was pretty cool. And up there is a Bitcoin ATM, where someone strapped the monitor just on top of a bill acceptor. And they wanted, you can't see it, but they wanted 4.5 Bitcoin for that thing, aka $2,000, you know. So it's probably like $600 bill acceptor, and yeah. Anyway, so that would have been, if someone bought it, expensive also. In January, hit $1,200. That was basically the first, I would say, the really first major bull run. In the beginning of the year, I don't think I have this. Yeah, I have it here. Someone said, you know, do I have a date here? No, I don't. Oh yeah, this is November. Someone is saying 645 for Bitcoin. No, yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. Well, and then it doubled. It went to 1,200. But there was a huge conference in Miami, the Bitcoin Miami conference, where I met Jeff. Actually, now it's called Quantum. Yes. And that was the largest Bitcoin conference at the time in the world, and that was also in Florida. And they've done it I think they've done it throughout every year, except in COVID. I think they took a break. Then came 2015. Something funny came out of this year. So 2014 was really a huge crypto year for me personally. I made a lot of contacts, a lot of people that I met, partially of course because of the Marscoin story. I got invited to the Mars Society, which is one of the largest space advocacy groups in the world, and they wanted to hear talk about this Bitcoin in general, and then Marscoin in particular, but they wanted to understand, they wanted to know what this thing is, so I gave a presentation there. But I met a couple of young kids in Miami who were here from this area, from the Tampa Bay area in Sarasota, and they had gotten their hands on some investor capital, and they were supposed to run a mining shop. And we accidentally more or less met in Miami because we're running into each other, because we're also from Sarasota. They were burning money left and right. They're like one party after the other. And Brian and myself, we were looking at this like, they really don't seem to be too serious about this whole, building a company kind of thing. So once we came back after the conference, they invited us to their office, which was down here in the hub. If you're familiar with Fruitville, there's this little office building, the hub. I'm not sure, I think it's still operational. It was like a co-working space. The founders had Bitcoin miners in every electrical outlet, actually. It was an interesting spot. And this is 2016. This is Lee, the gentleman we were talking about earlier. And Lee, I hired Lee in my previous company. We were short staffed, and it's also a fun story how we met, but we brought him on board, and then we fired him basically a few months later, or put him on half-time because on part-time because his code had holes left and right, and it wasn't really what was necessary or needed. But throughout the years, I kept the Bitcoin meetups going, and in 2016, all of a sudden, the first successful Bitcoin ATM manufacturer showed up here in Florida, in particular here in Bradenton. Not sure if you know, Bradenton is a big spot for Czech folks, especially the professional tennis players. They love Bradenton. A lot of them come here every summer. And as it so happens, a couple of these guys, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, got very rich with casinos in Prague. And one of them found his Catholic awakening and decided not having to do anything anymore with casinos, and went into Bitcoin ATMs. This was in 2014. By 2015, he was basically half bankrupt. So his other buddies, who made even more money in the casinos, bailed him out, propped him up, and said, "You need to go to America. That's where the Bitcoin people are. Not in Prague, not in Europe." So he set up shop here in Bradenton, and was Googling and looking around, and obviously, my name was plastered all over the internet when it came to this particular area and the Bitcoin meetup. So I met him, I met his investors, and they're like, "Well, it would be so cool if we could just set up a kind of a subsidiary or some kind of a new joint venture, new company in the US, where we take our machines that we build in Europe and you guys run it." And the person that I knew at the time that needed some work was Lee. So I pulled him in, and that's his buddy, a CPA of 30 years, a cornerstone of Venice, basically, a good friend of his. We pulled him into, so this was actually the lunch where we bribed him with food to join our little endeavor. And we launched Byte Federal in November 2016. Federal grew to 30 ATMs. I just wanted to show this picture. This is mining at home. Not me, this was a friend of mine. A total fire hazard. They actually had a little mini fire too at some point, where the wife said, "Okay, this is it. I'm not going to go any further with it." But one of our engineers set up the mining rigs here for a friend of ours. And in every room, he had these these GPUs are hanging here from the shelf. If you remember, 2017 was the second big bull run up to 17,000?
3 to 9. I had correct.
17,000. 17,000. 17,000, right? In the beginning of the year, Bitcoin was around $1,000, 800 or so. And everybody's like, "Well, maybe it's going to go to 3,000 at the end of the year. That would be crazy, right?" Well, it ended up 17,000. I think this was the first time that the general population really took notice of it. Yeah, this is 2018. The FBBAs launched. The first meetings were held here. And the FBBA is the Florida Blockchain Business Association.
There's one on Miami Airport. Aircraft mechanic. They had
The ATMs, yeah. The ATMs, so there's probably at this point, I'm not sure exactly how many there are in Florida, but thousands, maybe even up to 10,000 ATMs in the state of Florida. So it's a lot of them. The FBBA was interesting because over the last 6 years, since Sam started this enterprise, the legislature, which caught and got Espinoza, if you will, in trouble, all of these ambiguities in the Florida statute have been kind of worked out and clarified in part by Sam and his team. Actually, our CFO, Mark, that you saw earlier, when he went through the statutes, he's like, "This just doesn't work. There needs to be clear for digital currencies." And so he marked that the statute's up, and then they went into a bill, and DeSantis signed it last year. So there actually came out of all of this an improvement, if you will, of the laws in favor for Bitcoins. We had one office here, so basically one of those warehouses where you have an office in the back and a warehouse. We broke up with our European partners. They couldn't deliver machines fast enough, and they weren't really so interested in our partnership at the time. So we said, like, this is not working for us. Also, the software needed to be particularly written for the US, for Florida, and that's us in 2020. If you're not familiar, this is a book I highly recommend, Bitcoin Standard by Safedin Ammous, an economist. That thing is beautiful. It explains the monetary history of the world, how it relates to Bitcoin in particular, what the gold standard did for Western civilization or civilization in general, as far as you can look back. And he makes a pretty strong case that if you think of the thousands of years of agricultural society, in the 1700s, all of a sudden, Bank of England decides to switch to a gold standard, and Newton, Isaac Newton, if you remember, was the boss of the mint in Britain at the time. So he sets up these very clear rules, and all of a sudden the Industrial Revolution occurs. You know, coincidence? Maybe. But at that point, every other European nation copies the British gold standard, and we suddenly see Europe and the rest of the world basically go into a technical innovation phase that's never been seen before. And you can partially, maybe if you make this argument, which he does very, very, I think it's a very well-written book, that if the money stays with the innovator and the citizens, then you make the decision whether a service or a product is good. It's your hard-earned money that makes that decision. If the money supply is with a bureaucrat or some dictator, he does not have the same investment in that money. And so the squandering of resources of society will happen probably a lot more and maybe even worse than if you are on a gold standard or anything similar. He's advocating a Bitcoin standard where society is on a hard money standard. We went from 300 locations to 1,300 locations, $120 million revenue, 44 states. In each state, you have to talk to the regulators. In each state, you have to file copious amounts of documentation. We're regulated like a bank, pretty much. Our mindset is very different. And those are two pictures, basically my life. My life of the last 3 or 4 years, basically is this, okay? And not much else, I'd say, in a way. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. ATM's going to Australia. This is me with Michelle's friend's beautiful Bitcoin clock. And some of the highlights this year, the SEC loses against Ripple. BlackRock is going into an ETF. So, you know, we've arrived, if you will. And I believe the future is going to be extremely bright for cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular. That's it.
Wow.